Welcome to a new episode of Crafting with Roswell. Today we'll be making a paperback pumpkin. This postcard is inside your bag and tells you the contents of your kit, supplies you will also need, and suggested extras. You receive a little container of orange paint, a paperback book. This one's a romancy. The biggest concern is the number of pages. This one's over 400, so this will make a nice size pumpkin. Paper clips. Now I have to get a message on my screen to go away. A paintbrush sponge. Your template for your pumpkin shape. And you will need a pencil, scissors, and I recommend paper towels for when you get to the painting step. This is an example of a paperback pumpkin created a couple years ago, and it gives you an idea of the general shape your pumpkin will take after you're finished cutting apart your stenciled pages. And it also shows you what will happen if your book is not big enough. So this is more of a quarter pumpkin, not even a half, not even a whole. And so this is where your page count comes into play. But this shows you that you can use a piece of wood, some naturally coiled wire to look like a vine at the top to add a little more character to your finished pumpkin. So let's get started. So first we're going to cut out our stencil shape. That way we can trace this with our pencil onto our book pages. And voila, that's already done for us. Next step is to start carefully removing the outer cover. After making sure we don't have any major breaks in the spine, splitting our book apart, we need the spine to stay together in order to keep the shape of the pumpkin. So I'm just going to start peeling the back cover, working my way over to the front cover, and removing that down the spine. So any white pieces that are sticking out, I'll pull away. But in general, you don't have to worry about that white page that stays onto that glue binding. Next, we're going to place our stencil on top of our front page. And I like to move this in from the spine about 1/4 of an inch or so. Sometimes cutting into the exact spine can be tricky. So I just like to move my template in about 1/4 of an inch instead of right up against that binding edge. And to save some cutting area, I tend to line up along the bottom of my paperback and just trace down and around. And this project is a little time consuming considering how many pages we have to cut, but you can cut more than one page at a time. So I tend to do 4 or 5. If you're comfortable doing more, by all means. This is just my common practice. So I also do from the edge a slit in towards the drawn template. I find that makes it easier to navigate your scissors around the page. And so then I cut around the top loop and then turn my book and cut around the bottom. These pages, we're just going to gently pull away because I'm going to show you a different technique to create the stem for your pumpkin. And that's using what's left of the glue binding of the paperback after we've cut away all of our pages. So now I'll trim the bottom and you'll end up with a nice heap of scrap pages because yes, a book is being repurposed for this craft. It will forever be a pumpkin. So that first section is done. Once you have your first section done, you'll see that a little bit of that glue binding is exposed. And the more we cut down, the more that will change. So since I've got one section already cut, I'm just going to actually trace around that section. Since it's still a fresh cut, lift back what I had already cut, grab my next section, trim in from the side, cut around the top, cut around the bottom, and again gently pull those top pages away from that glue binding to expose what will be our stem, or one of your stem options. Pulling a branch from your yard is also a great way to add a little character to your pumpkin. But this glue stem is naturally included in our paperback, and another option as well. So I tend to pull 1 or 2 pages at a time. I definitely don't want to pull and rip our glue binding. I'm trying to keep that as intact as possible. And you can see more and more of it is revealed. And it has a naturally rough appearance to it. That's perfect for the dimensional character you would get on a stem for a pumpkin. So now we just keep tracing, lifting sections, cutting, and pulling away. And so this is another project where you'll get into a groove with these steps and work your way through your entire book. You could find during the process that your pages start to shift, and so your shape might start to change. You can always add your template back into the middle, leave it a distance from your spine again, retrace, and start fresh with a new cutout following your newly traced template. So you can see more of that glue is exposed to start creating our stem. And so a bit of cutting later, your book will look similar to this. So all of the book pages have been cut. This book was slightly less than 400 pages in length, but you can see the rough character you get from the glue binding that makes a perfect looking stem. So I'm just going to trim this down because I don't need my stem to be quite that long. That extra piece will get thrown away, and now I can go ahead and fan out my pumpkin. And with your pumpkin, you'll have to play a bit to get your pages to fan out evenly. You can use your paper clips to clip the two ends together, so your front pieces and your back pieces, to connect your pumpkin to make one round pumpkin if you would like. And then I just recommend kind of pulling in between pages and bending at that spine to give them a little separation to help your pumpkin look a little fuller, to keep pages from bunching up. In my pumpkin, I've noticed I do have one section that was a little more broken than others, and pages naturally want to split at that part. So one fix for this would be adding glue up that middle to connect these pages and hide where it's kind of very weak at that specific point. Another option is to not fan this out completely. If you're having this on a mantle or against a wall, you can see how keeping it as half a pumpkin versus trying to create a whole pumpkin will help fill in and hide where that break is. So now it's time to add some orange paint. This is completely optional. To give it more of a realistic pumpkin look, I like to close the book, dab my sponge brush into this paint, and just paint along the edges of my pages. And I find that to be easiest when I'm holding the book closed. You don't want to do a sopping amount of paint. It's just a little bit, at a time. We don't want to glue all these pages essentially shut by using this paint. So it's just kind of covering the very edge of the paper. The other option is to actually leave your pages plain. It still looks pretty cute without any paint along the edges with a little binding stem. It's completely your choice. And just to give you extra ideas, you could also make a gourd shape to go along with your pumpkin shape if you're trying to make a display. So when I paint, I'm just doing the edges, and I tend to avoid the very flat part on the bottom, just so I don't have paint sitting on my table surface. Nothing worse than having paint transfer to your furniture. So I'm just doing the main edges that you can see when the book is open. And now, per usual, for one of these programs, you're watching me paint. But luckily, you don't have to watch the paint dry for this particular craft. In reviewing the video, I can see a spot that I need to go back and fix afterward. But once you've painted your edges, this is where the paper towels come in handy. I recommend fanning through. You don't want any of the pages sticking together because of the paint. So I like to fan it open a few times to help separate them, and then spread apart the pumpkin into the shape that you're hoping for. And that helps the page ends dry quicker. And so that paint just gives you a little touch of pumpkin color around your paperback pumpkin. Constantly tweaking, trying to get it to sit just right. And there you have it, a paperback pumpkin.